Hello and welcome to today's episode of Activating Magic. I'm your host, Darla Ledoux, and I'm here with the fabulous Mark Porteous.
Hello, Darla. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Me too. So, as I said, Mark hosts this amazing event, the Soulful Leadership Retreat, which I am sure we'll talk about today. I got to experience him and his magic on stage, and it was lots of fun. So, Mark, talk a little bit about your journey first to, the world of coaching and transformation and hosting events. Like, what drew you originally down this path?
Um, it's funny because when you say originally, I'm doing the lineage going back. How far do I go back? So I'm gonna go back to when I kind of realized that I had a purpose, which was
Mm,
when I was 22 years old. It was in
wow.
1992, and I was working for Greenpeace International. My girlfriend at the time brought me to my very first metaphysical bookstore called the Spiral Circle, downtown Orlando. And I read a bumper sticker that changed my life. And the bumper sticker
Okay.
said, you've all read it before, you've all heard it, we've talked about it, that we are not human beings having spiritual experiences, we're spiritual beings having human experiences. And while that, conceptually was already part of me, reading it helped me to understand the bridge between my mother's understanding of Christianity and my
Mm,
father's quest for spiritual truth that encouraged me to kind of do the same thing. So it
wow.
was that day that I went home and told my father, who had written three books, that I wanted to write a book called The Human Experience. And his response to me was, don't expect to make any money writing a book. You have to have a business, not just a book. And at the time, I didn't understand that the book could be related to the business. Um, and again, like I said, he had three books at that time and businesses around it, but his stuff was really political and stuff I didn't really understand that much at the time. Um, but what I did know was that a friend of mine was uh, actually following the Grateful Dead and had landed in Panama City Beach, living out of his van, doing hair wraps, tying string to little girls' hair with beads at the bottom. And somebody came up to him on the beach and said, my daughter's been waiting for 30 minutes for a hair wrap. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm moving as fast as I can. And he said, I see that. I see how fast you're moving. You should be doing this at Disney. I'm an executive there. I can get you in. And within 2 years, he had dozens of locations and had made his first
Wow.
$1 million. $1 million in 2 years, or $1 million in 1 year, within 2 years of this hair wrap business from being homeless. And I share that
Wow.
because I was like, oh, that seems easy. If he can do it, I can do it, which is very relevant even in our industry because we see lots of just do what I did and you'll get the same results. Um, I wasn't at Disney. I didn't have all of that backing, all the other support, but I did have 100 employees around the country that were working at Kings Island in Ohio and the Beach Water Park and Oasis in California. And after 5 years of doing this, I realized I hadn't made any progress writing my book. I was hoping to have this would fund the book and that I'd just be able to build a business that could run itself and I could just write. And that was not the experience that I had. So after coming back to Florida, I ended up selling my business, going into sales. And it took a long time to get from sales uh, to the point where I finally wrote my book. But that was what inspired me and created the journey. But it wasn't until my kids were born. Actually, my wife was pregnant with twins, and I realized that I had been spent 18 years in a sales job to fund my passion for writing and living a life of purpose and passion. Um, and that if I didn't do something differently, that I was going to teach my children the same deferred lifestyle of putting off my purpose and my passion. And so that's really what got me on the path consciously, like, uh-oh, I need to do something different.
Wow. Okay, there's so much to unpack there. First of
Sorry.
all, you
I went back
had,
20 to 30 years. Sorry about
I
that.
love it. I love this story. I just want to make sure I'm clear. You had a hair wrap stand at Kings Island?
I did.
Do you know I lived in Cincinnati for probably at that time. So I
1995 from 92 to
yeah.
95.
I remember when I went to when I moved there from Minnesota, the land of 10,000 lakes, and I
Yeah.
said, is there a beach here at all?" And they said, "Oh yeah, it's off I-70 at the water park." And I was like, "That's not right."
So yes, the beach water park was right across
Yeah.
the street from Kings Island, and I had people that
Yep.
worked at both of them. In
Hmm.
fact, there was one of them. Most of them were 16 to 18 years old. They were all high school kids, but I had a 20-year-old that was running all of like my calendar, my employee schedule, and my inventory and everything else. While working full time at a doctor's office, she was doing this just for fun, and she's been running my life ever since.
Oh my gosh. That's
That's how I met my
amazing.
wife.
Oh my goodness. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. I love
Threw that
that
one in there.
so
You weren't
much.
expecting that either.
No. I'm like in shock right now since I know Renee also. So that's amazing.
Mhm.
Um, you were 22 and you realized you had a purpose. So when you read the bumper sticker that said, "I'm a spiritual being in a physical body,"
Mhm.
how did that connect? Like, what did you know about your purpose at that point?
So, my father was a minister until I was 6 years old. And when he and my mom divorced, he was kicked out of the church that he had built.
Okay.
That's when the questions started around the religion that both of them were a part of, particularly like what does it take to be exiled from
Mm.
community? And this is something that has been played a part in
Ooh,
me in building community and leading community.
I
Like
have so many chills right now. Wow.
he experienced mutiny. And so I had to look at questions about religion. So I started studying religion when I was around 10 years old. By the time I was in high school, I was looking at Buddhism and Taoism and Muslim and Judaism. And I've got lots and lots of books about all of the religions. And we were really looking at what was the commonality, and what was the human part of it,
Mhm.
and really being able to dissect it. So that got me on the journey, but it wasn't until I read this quote that it kind of created an umbrella around all of that. And it really was more about, okay, this is a tool. The human experience it can be now a book to help you express your own understanding, this chicken soup method of understanding spirituality. And uh, for me, that was like the trigger of saying, okay, I want to get this out there just to share the background that I had. And when I first shared it with the woman at that bookstore, after I finally got it written, the first thing she went and was looked at the very back, and she looked at the bibliography. And it's like, what are you doing? And she said, well, I want to see who your mentors are. Who did you learn from?
Mhm. And did you have mentors in there, or were you like, "Oh, I better get some mentors"?
But no, no, it was my bibliography. It was the books that I had read in her store.
Oh,
Gene Houston, Barbara Marx Hubbard's, many of these became my actual teachers and mentors,
mhm.
but started off as mentors in books.
Amazing. So then your kids are about to be born, and you decide, "I can't defer my dreams anymore." I'm assuming your sales job wasn't like selling spiritual books or anything.
Right. So when I realized that I had spent 5 years building a business and not having any time to write the book, I was able to sell the business really just to get out from under it, and got into sales. And it was cable, internet, and phone, Time Warner at first, and
Mm,
now Spectrum.
got it. Yeah. So it was time to do what you've known since you were 22, you were wanting to do.
Hmm.
And what was your first foray into like coaching and writing?
Well, I went to Beverly Ford, the owner of the Spiral Circle, and I told her I was going to go off and uh, leave my job and save the world. And she looked me in the eyes with her open heart and said, "Oh dear, you're not ready for that yet. You still need that job, and that job needs you, and your family needs that job." And when she said that, I was holding back the tears because
Mm.
um, my mentor was I thought coming from a place of scarcity, like how is this spiritual person telling me like, oh no, you have this safe, secure job. Why would you leave it? But what she was saying was that you're not ready. And that what I learned from her over the next year as I got ready was that the fastest way for me to get where I wanted to be was to understand why I was exactly where I needed to be.
Mm. Ooh, that's good.
And so that was the first foray where I was like, okay, now what am I going to do? Now I've got the book. What's next? Um, and I did take a year to look at what's next. And my wife was the one who suggested life coaching. And at the time, the only life coaching I knew about was from people on TV, and it was mostly rich housewives, and it was the new form of therapy, I thought.
Hmm.
And so I
Hmm.
was like, I don't know if I can be a life coach, but us look up and see what they make. And so we looked to see what the average life coach in 2012 was making less than $20,000 a year. And she said, well, you're looking at the average life coach. You've never been an average sales rep. Why don't you look at the top coaches? And we saw the Tony Robbins and not only people making eight figures, but lots making seven. And so many people that just said, here's the map to making six figures in your first year as a coach.
Mm.
And my very first coach asked me, well, what is your niche going to be? And I said, I wanted to be a spiritual coach. And he literally laughed at me and said, well, you're not going to make any money as a spiritual coach. You can pick any niche you want, but it has to be one of these three. You can pick health, wealth, or love, and then sneak in spirituality like medicine and the dog food. And so that was my introduction to coaching and spirituality. And so I picked business, money, and I decided I would work with holistic practitioners, energy workers, the people that I wanted to serve, and help them with sales and marketing, which is what my background had been.
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
That was where I got started. Yeah.
So I want to talk a bit about soulful leadership and um, community, right? It feels like that experience with your dad being ousted from the community was so pivotal. And, I've known you for a while, like, Facebook friends and all of that. And I saw this event you were doing during COVID. I saw you marketing it. And I got to go last year. And the people that you bring together in community are so special and heart-centered. And I'm imagining all you ever hoped you could create. What made you decide to start doing events and really bring people together in a unique way?
Um, Part of it was actually, again, a lot of it was my wife's urging. My very first event that I attended was after getting the book published. Hay House, everybody, most people probably that are listening here know who Hay House Publishing is.
Mhm.
Has an event or had an event called Hay House Movers and Shakers. It was 2011, September 11th. 2011.
Mm.
And I remember being in New York City when there were armed military people on all the subways as I was going to this event. And I walked in the door to my very first, I'd never been to any type of industry event like this. And I see at the very end of this long table of books, this very small, fragile lady who looks a lot like Louise Hay. And I find out that it is and ask if I can hug her without breaking her fragile little body. And that was kind of the introduction. She didn't do any talking. She wasn't at the event. She was just Debbie being there. It was people from her team, but that was the introduction. And then I went to another one called the Wealthy Visionary Conference with Marsha Weeder, who's now Maya Weeder. And it was at that experience where I was like, oh my gosh, this is like, I want to have 3-day events. I want to have my own, but I didn't, wasn't really in a place. But it was at that event you never know who you're going to meet and where, but in the registration table was Alan Davidson, who I just thought was a volunteer. Didn't realize he was the one who had organized the event and was the person who behind over 100 JV launches in our industry. And then later I ran into him again at my second event. Right from there, I got free tickets to Margaret Lynch's event, who you heard speak last year at the event as well. And when I was there with him, I actually asked to hire him. And he said, well, what are your case studies? What results have you had so I can help a launch? And I said, well, I'm just starting. He goes, well, then you're not ready to hire me yet. Go get some results first and then
There's
come
that
back
you're
to me.
not ready yet thing.
It is. There's so much that you're not ready yet. Go get the results and come back. And it was funny because it was a few years later. I was 5 years later. I was he was at a Margaret Lynch event, and this is to answer your question. He got a download. He called me and said, "I see you as the soul connector. You have three types of connections that you do. You connect people to who they are at soul level. You connect them to their soul purpose, and you connect them to their soul tribe." And so that was kind of the beginning of saying, "Oh, I want to have an event around soulful leadership." And he and your friend, our friend Rhonda Renee, Lisa Witter, and Lars Gustafson, my soul advisors, all flew into Orlando, and we had a little retreat together, a mastermind retreat where we rebranded from the Inspired Messengers Network to the Soul Affiliate Alliance. And this is the very interesting part about your work and really about the being the intuition piece is that up until that point, I outsourced my intuition.
Mm.
Even at that day, Rhonda
Mhm.
was the one who was doing her pendulum and they were doing their muscle testing. And I had spent thousands of dollars to learn how to be more intuitive and how to trust my intuition, and still was outsourcing it, still was having other people validate for me. And they were the ones who picked the date 2/2/2020, not
Mm.
realizing it was the weekend of the Super Bowl. Um, and after I found out, I tried to back out of what everybody else's intuition said was the right date, but it was perfect. It was exactly what it needed to be. But again, it was outsourcing my intuition. And now on day one of every year, that's the first thing that we do is we talk about what is the way now that you use to tap into it, into tuition, and how do you practice that? How do you get better at that? Because to me, what you teach is the most important tool that we can have in life and in business.
Yeah. Well, I think so. It's helped me a
Mm,
lot. And I love that story and I relate, and I'm sure people listening relate to outsourcing your intuition. You knew that at least intuition was valuable. A lot of people outsource their, like usurp their intuition for someone else's logic,
mm,
which is a whole next level.
mm,
I I'm sure you remember I know Alan, knew Alan.
mm.
So I love every time you talk about him. Um, the soul connector. What was it like when you heard that? Like, did it immediately resonate? What was that?
Um, it felt like a shell too big to fit in,
Hmm. How does it feel now?
like a comfortable pair of jeans.
Mm.
Um, Jeans are worn. I can't describe it. I feel like it was a gift because I've really had to step into that and have been grateful to have a lot of mentors to help me work on my chakras. I just was sending thanks to one of my early mentors, talking about my yellow chakra still being contained, that I was holding back my power. And I realized
Mm.
that that was part of being raised by my mom and two sisters, was that all of the masculine qualities um,
Mm.
I tried to dim down. Um, and so yeah, it's been a very interesting process to be able to open up the chakras and be able to
Yeah.
step into that title and all of the pieces that it means, all of the branding of what it means. And I constantly get tested on um, the leadership piece of it, because being the sole connector, that the idea was to lead a community of community leaders, all here to help elevate human consciousness.
When you say like you step back from the leadership part of it, is that just like doubting? How does that show up in your mind?
When you say, when I step back from the
You talked about the leadership part being
mm,
challenging.
hmm
Is
so
um is it like a self-doubt? Like who am I to gather all these amazing humans?
it
Or
used to be that. So that's
Okay.
what it was. And now it's different level of leadership. Now it's so what is showing up for me right now is around judgment. We've got
Mm,
our third Soulful Leadership anthology coming out in January,
mm,
right around the time of an inauguration. And what I was seeing for myself was I did not like being judged. And I knew that if I didn't like it, I needed to get over doing it for other people. So I was really
mm,
looking at myself with judgment. And especially when you look at like David Hawking's work with the map of consciousness, and wanting to raise human consciousness, I knew I had to raise my own. So I was actually in a workshop
yeah.
around that. And we were talking about the values. And one of the values that I put up there was judgment or justice. The word was
Mm,
justice. And she was pointing out that, especially when you're working in consciousness, when you have justice, that leads to judgment. And so I wanted to change it
mm,
into curiosity. And um, it's working well for me right now in a very challenging political environment to
mm.
instead of being judgmental, to being curious, but that
Curious.
also brings up incredible challenges all around me.
Hmm. Anything you want to share about that?
Yeah, so I posted a very controversial
Mm,
meme on Facebook that said, "Father, forgive them. They know
mm,
not what they have done. They know
mm.
not what they do." And it's a Bible verse about Jesus saying, "Please forgive the people that put me here."
Yeah.
And I was not saying it out of a place of judgment for them. I was saying it out of a place of them not understanding, of me thinking I knew and that they
Mm,
didn't.
mm,
And that's arrogant to think.
mm,
And I realized that. And again, it was a place of non-judgment, but there were people who were in judgment who were saying, "Don't you dare forgive them. They do know what they're doing. Don't let them off
mm,
the hook," which is a
mm,
very interesting thing. So I got that on one side, and then I got the other side of people saying, I won't post this, I won't share this, I don't tell people how I'm voting. But the fact that you said that makes me feel like now you won't like me if you know. And
mm.
I don't want, I love you, and I feel like you won't love me anymore. And I have
It's a
people in my
hard
family
time
that
to
say
be
that.
a leader.
Hmm.
It really is an interesting time to be a leader and to share your truth and decide what truth is.
And
Yeah.
that's the challenging part, is to really be honest and true to ourselves, and to really being able to tap in,
Mm,
and have the courage. I was talking about the map of consciousness, that once we get to the level of courage, which is 200, then we can make aligned choices. When we're making choices that are under the level of courage, we're making them out of fear and judgment and all of the other things that makes to less than ideal decisions.
yeah. I assert our magic is always at the higher consciousness, right? When we really know how to hear how source is guiding us. But it's hard sometimes when there's fear, when when the vibration on the planet is lower or stressed, it can be challenging to hear our soul clearly and to know, am I guided? And I'm thinking of just stating things with leadership. Am I guided to share? I actually woke up the morning after the election and I thought, oh, I'm just staying off social media. And then it was like, oh no, you need to say something. I'm not the person that's always like saying something when it's popular to say something. And I was like, no, you gotta say something. Um, and it takes something to trust that, and people aren't always going to be happy.
And that's how it was for me. I was literally guided. I was like, "Oh no, I can't write that for all the different reasons." And
Mm,
I checked in. I literally did check in, and it was like, no, yes, you're going to make people hurt,
mm,
mad, and happy. There were people that were, expressing complete agreement, and
yeah.
all of the different things, but that wasn't why I was doing it. Somebody needed to hear it,
Yes.
to release
Yes.
whatever they needed. And I had to trust that if that's what I was being guided to share, that's why I needed to share. But what's funny was that after I shared it and I told my kids about it, my wife first told them because she had friends unfriending her and didn't understand why, and went to them and said, "Dad did this thing," and they're like, "Don't talk to him about it because then you guys are going to fight." And so instead, I talked to them about it, and they're like, "Dad, it sounds like you're aware that you created a mess. Don't you think you should clean it up?"
That's what happens when they're raised in consciousness, huh?
Yep. Yes, indeed.
I love that. And your kids participate at your event also.
They do. They're twins, 14, and my daughter Eden, like a Garden of Eden, and Zen is a Zen garden. She's very out front and extroverted, and he's more introverted and tech guy in the back of the room.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking of how you said you never know who you'll meet when you go to an event. And you met Alan, you met Louise Hay. I mean, that's amazing. Um, and I am just still blown away that you would likely have never met your wife, who has apparently been a good guide for you, nudging you in correct directions a lot. Um, if you hadn't like decided to follow this random friend's business idea.
Hmm.
It's wild. Like you can't make that up, that the way things get orchestrated in our favor.
Absolutely. One of my favorite quotes, and I always misquote it, but it's Steve Jobs talking about you can only connect the dots looking backward. And when I
Yes.
look at all of the dots and all of the things that could have been done differently, and um, it was the following the whisper rather than waiting for the two by four. I did get lots of two by fours that got me back on track as well.
Same. Okay, so connecting the dots, this feels like a good segue into your magic. It's interesting because I so feel that when we're really in our magic, we only know the next step, right? So if the next step is make the post, or the next step is say yes to that, or the next step is go to this event, and we don't always know why. Um, and then sometimes other people help us with their magic, and they might know why, right? Like Alan gave you that gift of this is, this is how you help people. Um, let's talk a little bit about how your magic shows up when you're working with your clients. Because I have this real sense that you've got a strong, what I call recognition magic, where you see who should meet, you make connections, like the aligned affiliates for people, for example. So how does that, first of all, talk a little bit about, how you do that practically, and then we'll talk about the magic behind it.
It's really funny. I got goosebumps when you said that you pointed out recognition because Rhonda Renee's work, and recognition is in my West.
Mm.
Um, Self-worth and recognition are the things that I'm here to teach and the things that I'm here to learn. And yeah, recognition is one of the gifts that I have. Um, I'm able to one recognize the divine in other people.
Mm.
I can see um, I look for, draw out of them what is their story and their hero's journey, and how that plays into what is their customer's journey. So again, I can see that.
Mm.
And then I can see like who are the people that are aligned with that, and how they can connect. And
Mm.
sometimes I just think I can put two people in a room and that they would see it as well. And Rhonda and a few other people have pointed out, like, no, that's something they still need guidance. Like, I don't get what are we supposed to do together? Or we do the same thing. We can't
Mm.
partner. I'm like, no,
Mm.
you both miss this gap, and here's how you can. So to me, that's the magic, is to be able to see not only what people that they're divine, but what their unique gifts are and how they complement other partners, so that they can create these conscious collaborations.
Wow, that's so good. I love that example of I think I can put two people in a room and they would just know, but they don't see it. Like, what is it? What is it that you see that they don't? And how have you learned to facilitate that?
It's very interesting because I think some of it may be intuitive that I'm not still fully aware of,
Hmm.
almost like second sight or other things. But it's part of it is just being able to look at, well, here's what you serve, and here's what's missing. Um, the main thing that I look for in partnership is alignment. And
Mm.
I've had partners who I'm not aligned with, but I can refer them to other people. And I've brought people together where I'm like, there's two perfectly unaligned people that make each other so happy, and it's because we see, um, I can see one where they are energetically, what their values are. And that's really kind of where it starts. And then from there, it's like, well, what is the service that you're providing? What is the need that you have? And so I can understand what other people offer and what they need and be able to match people based on that.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting. As I've been recording this podcast, this idea of recognition magic, like I always see it as seeing the the connection, the alignment, but it's been coming up so much. It's like seeing the gaps also of like, oh, this is like a glaringly obvious hole that you see that maybe they don't.
I think that's right. That's a very well put.
Huh.
When I said I see what they offer and what they need, it's the gaps, and it's almost like a red flag, a very big glaring, like, oh my gosh, look at this perfect fit. I'm like, where? I'm like, right there where the gap is.
They're like, I don't get it. Say it another way. That's
Say it
amazing.
another way. That's so right.
Um, and you talked about the hero's journey, and I know at your event we did a hero's journey exercise.
Mhm.
When you work with people, if you're talking with them one on one about their story, how do you experience that? How do you know like what the heart of the journey is?
Uh, they usually know because, as you can tell, especially doing these interviews, it's when people light up.
Mm.
Um, those are the pieces that you really want to pull out. One of our clients, his name is Dave Grace, and he's 81 years old. He runs something called Olympia Sports Camp. He's got 2,000 kids every year that come through there, but he's got 8 months a year where it's empty, and now he wants to bring transformational leaders and event hosts and stuff to
Mm.
come to this event. And it's so funny because he's got so much experience and so much validity and credibility, but he's trying something new. And so when he was talking about it, he was talking about heart math. He's been part of heart math for 15 years. They all know him. He's able to use all of their content. He talks about the people from the Mavericks that are part of their board, and like all of this stuff. And so when he starts to say the things that he gets lit up about, that's the part where that's the juice that we want to be able to draw out of. And then when he starts to come down in energy, when it's about marketing, like, how are we going to make this happen? What are the hows to it? And so then I start getting excited, and it reminds me of Disney.
Mm.
Walt Disney has a group called the Imagineers, and the Imagineers have two different groups. One group sits in a room separate from the other, and they have all of the ideas, the creative ideas. And so they want to make Peter Pan fly. You can't say, no, that can't be done. That's not their job. Their job is to create. And then they hand it off to another group, and they're the ones who make it actually happen. And so for me, like, that's
Mhm.
part of the juice, is to see where people are getting excited, and then where the energy dips,
Mhm.
that feels good to me. I'm like, oh, I can get excited about marketing your message and your mission, and
Mm.
that's where the juice is.
Oh, it feels like that's part of how you see those holes.
Yeah,
You're reading
exactly.
the energy of it. Interesting. Love it. Ooh, so juicy. Okay, so earlier, I'm going to take a turn because
Okay.
earlier you talked about like the yellow energy of your third chakra, I'm assuming,
It
and
is the third chakra, yes.
um, the masculine and, being raised in a household of women. And I'm kind of curious because I think you're the second male I've interviewed on activating magic.
I'm
Um,
honored.
yeah. How has it been being spiritual, magical in a male body? Like it's more common. for women to gather
Mm.
and talk about these things.
Hmm.
How's that been for you?
Very interesting. It's funny because when I was younger, I used to think that I had a lot of my feminine energy and qualities because I was raised by my mom and two sisters. It wasn't until I got
Yeah.
into this work that I realized I was raised by my mom and two sisters because I already had this energy
Ah, oh, yes.
and I
So like
needed
the
this
perfect
energy.
environment.
Exactly. And so because of that,
Mhm.
because of the way I had the energy and because I had the nurture and the nature together,
Mhm.
I've had very healthy relationships with women.
Mhm.
Three of my ex-girlfriends were at our wedding and are friends with my wife, and because I loved them before, it's just that's the kind of relationships,
Mhm.
and that's important to me because I'm a huge proponent of the Dalai Lama's quote that Western women will save the world,
Mhm.
and it's up to me
Yeah.
to help support that happen.
Mm. Amazing. What percent of the people at your event would you say are women? I feel like it's maybe 70.
I'd say 70, 75 probably.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that reframe, Mark, of like, I actually, my soul came in like this and chose that experience so that I could be nurtured in that way.
Hmm.
So often people are, kind of like upset about it or resistant or like it's something wrong we have to fix that, this was the family. I mean, I definitely went through a lot of that in my spiritual journey of like, why couldn't I have just had parents that saw me or, a place where I was really supported and yet all of the qualities that come from the exact family.
In
Pretty
fact,
amazing.
it's because of not having a father that was available that seeded my desire to have a much better relationship with children from a very young age. I
Mm,
started thinking about
yeah.
children when I was 11 years old. I started thinking about my children growing up in heaven on earth, in
Mm,
fact. Uh,
wow.
that was one of my first um, memories of trying to bury that down, of saying, like, who am I to have
Mm,
children that are
mm,
Christ-like, was what I kept thinking. And realizing that we're all born Christ-like and
mm,
become more human-like because of our indoctrination. But um, yeah, so I came in with that energy, and then now being able to be focused on being a dad and being able to be more present as an entrepreneur, that was the biggest challenge, especially before they started going to school, where I was here, they were there, and I couldn't be there. So I felt like I wasn't being a
mm,
great entrepreneur, and I wasn't being a great dad, and I still feel those challenges, and keep working at doing better at them.
mm. Yeah, that's a lot. I just thought of someone I want to introduce you to because you said heaven on earth. So I'm gonna connect you and invite her to your
Jeez.
event because that's her mission.
Hmm.
I love
I
it.
didn't realize when I first had these images at 10 and 11 years old. Again, I thought it was just because of my father being a minister, that it was just programming that was in my brain or something else.
Mm,
And it wasn't until getting into this industry in my 40s and having people do end up and just finding out that there's a lot of people with this shared mission of it's
mhm,
not a biblical sense. It's just reawakening to heaven on earth now.
mhm. Soul family.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of, can you talk a little bit about the Soulful Leadership Retreat? I think people can still get tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in February 6th through 8th of 2025, the Super Bowl weekend, as I mentioned earlier. And
Mhm,
it has the same format that it has since 2020, where day one is all about connecting to who you are and being able to tap into your intuition. Day two is all about your connecting to why you're here. What is your customer journey? What does that look like? And day three, connecting to your soul tribe. That's your perfect customers, the people that you're here to serve. It's your dream team, the people that are here to support you. And then what I call affiliate ambassadors, influencers, people that want to share your message, joint venture partners for those who are looking in the basic
mhm,
vernacular. Um, but the structure of it is so that it's lots of little mini masterminds. We aggregate the room. We have hosts at each table, and we make sure that people
Mm.
move around the room so that when we do our breakouts during each session, you're sharing who you are at soul level. You're sharing, this is how I do tap into my intuition. This is my customer journey. So we really want to bring together the wisdom of the room rather than just the gurus on the stage.
Yeah, it's really great like that. I've had a couple people I met there promote me in the last, 8 months. I have bought from people that I met there. So
Mm.
really great aligned place for connection.
But one of the things you just brought up, because you bought there, you bought something from them, but most likely not during the 3 days. One of the things that we do is we create a container
Correct.
there um, of safety and security so that we don't have to come feel like we're going to have 200 people selling to us, that we're really trying to
Yes.
create soul
Yes.
connections and
Let
that you
me be
can.
clear. I got on someone's list and I like took one of their offers probably
Yeah.
6 months later or something like that. Yeah.
And then I only share that because I was just thinking about that energy of it in the container, and it's
Yeah.
such an important piece is creating the container.
Yeah. Yeah. It really feels like people are genuinely, curious and interested in supporting you in the moment while you're
Hmm.
there, the energy exchange.
Absolutely. And again, day two, or day one, we have an evening activity that is actually Partner Palooza, sponsored with my partner David Ricklin and the JV directory. And then the second evening, we have a Titan panel where some
Mhm.
of our industry leaders. I've got some really fun and exciting new people that'll be on the panel this year. But it's just a way to get
Nice.
feedback from people, direct coaching, laser coaching.
Mhm. I love it. So we'll share that link below, soulfulleadershipretreat.com. And then you have the roadmap.
Yeah,
We'll put that link too. Do you want to tell people about this?
yeah, the roadmap is really my journey, my map that I would take my clients through, which is basically what we do those 3 days. It's the process of connecting to who you are and being able to tap into your inner guidance first, being able to lay out what does your customer journey look like, um, what are the things that you need to have in order to be joint venture ready, to be a sole affiliate, as I call
Mm.
them. So all of that is really in the guidebook, and then it ends with a process that one of our clients and my mentor Nancy Jutton created called the discern process. When I was getting my
Mm.
media one sheet created, we actually were using Chat GPT to put my process that I take people through into an anagram, and using discernment and making sure that you have
Mm.
intent alignment and all the pieces. So everybody will get my secret sauce in there as well.
I love it. One last question. I always imagine that these airwaves are like in the headphones of people who maybe aren't yet in this world. They're magical, they're awakening, and they're wondering if they could, create a life doing what they love, have a lifestyle that works for them, be more overtly intuitive and maybe in their job, and they don't have the community. What would you say to someone like that?
Interesting. It was a curve at the end. If they don't have community, I love the way that you positioned that. Um, First of all, just being comfortable with your own exploration.
Mm.
One of our clients and friends is creating a new podcast called Quest for the Divine,
Mm.
and just getting comfortable with the fact that you're a seeker,
Mm.
and to have the mindset of a seeker, not a knower, and that you that will
Mhm.
open up doors for you, and so you can go into a community where there are other seekers, and you're invited, and you're welcomed and looked
Mm.
out for. When you go into a new community with all of the answers, it creates a lot of resistance and everything else. So,
Mm.
just again, shifting into that seeker's mind, and being comfortable in exploring outside of your comfort zone.
That's so good. Yeah, I'm thinking of I invited someone to your event recently and they didn't seem excited. And I was like, you have no idea that this invite, like, because they're kind of newer in business, right? Like,
Hmm.
like you don't know actually what you're being invited to. Didn't have a framework for it. And then the idea of going in as a seeker and being supported is just brilliant versus
And the
like,
other
oh, I
thing I
have
would
to
say
know
is
this already.
the second thing is once you're comfortable with that, bring a buddy. If
Mm,
you don't have a community, start with a community of two. If you
mm,
can find somebody, and if you don't have
yeah.
somebody, put that on your intention list of being open to receiving them, and start putting out there of who you want that person to be, like as far as how you want them to show up in your life.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, because the person that thinks you're the least crazy, bring them.
Yes, there you go. The other crazy nut. That's the one.
Exactly. Thank you, Mark. I'm so grateful for our connection and friendship. And thanks for, I know it's a big deal to put on events. So thanks for creating that space for people to find their tribe.
I appreciate it. It's wonderful to have a self-expression, and I'm grateful to be aligned with wonderful leaders like you.
Thanks,
Thank you for what you
Mark.
do.
We'll see you soon.